73 minors were amongst a group of suspected victims of human trafficking from Zimbabwe intercepted in Polokwane, Limpopo last night. So the victims include 60 adults who did not have the required documents for legal entry into South Africa. The group is being transported in a convoy of minibus taxis. And just last week, the Border Management Authority, the BMA, announced that it had intercepted 42 buses carrying unaccompanied children from Zimbabwe. Now, let's just take this discussion further. We're going to be joined by Willem Els, Senior Trainer Coordinator, in fact, at the Institute for Security Studies. Willem, good afternoon, and thank you for your time with us here on the SABC at this hour.
Good afternoon, Liesl.
Let's look at the reality on the ground at this point, given the incidences this week alone that have come to the fore. How prevalent is human trafficking, especially this time of the year in South Africa?
It is very prevalent. You know, if you look at the organized crime index for Africa, South Africa lays at number 3 in Africa, behind the DRC and Nigeria. And if you look at the 14 indicators that we are looking at, the 14 different crimes that we are looking at, we see that amongst them, your human trafficking came in at number 2 as the most prevalent, just behind your financial crimes. So that is very active in South Africa. We must understand that, we spoke about the sting operation. We work on a rule of thumb that for every bust, there's normally 20 that got away. So that is more or less the ratio that we are working on.
Willem, thank you for that, because as we look at identifying patterns and really looking at interpreting the data that's also emerging, perhaps you could help us distinguish between myths and reality, the difference between human trafficking from migrant smuggling. Help us understand that further.
Okay, with human trafficking, you basically traffic the people against their will. There are 3 main categories that we are looking at in South Africa. The first one, of course, is your minors and that are being smuggled. There was an incident last year where 3 minors were smuggled out to Europe and from there to the Caribbean, or they were attempted to do that after the parents have been killed. So these syndicates are very active in South Africa. And then secondly, sex trafficking, where many young ladies are being lured with contracts, lucrative contracts for modeling, and then when they reach the destination or a different destination, then they were told their passports are confiscated, and then they are being introduced forcibly to the use of drugs, and then these traffickers and the syndicates can control them in the sex trade. And then also we have the trafficking of people for forced labor. So those are the 3 main categories that are prevalent in South Africa.
So given the developments that have occurred since the implementation of the trafficking laws in South Africa, what's been observed on that front? And then as we look at the role of transnational organized crime groups in human trafficking, how are they bypassing that? Well, what are we not getting right?
Well, in the first place, these organized crime syndicates are extremely organized. There's a lot of money involved. They compromise a lot of state-embedded actors in order to accomplish their goals. So that is why they are very active. It's very lucrative. You ask about human smuggling as well, and that is also what is happening this time of the year, where we see that a lot of illegal immigrants want to enter South Africa. Then they pay these organized crime syndicates in order to smuggle them across the border into South Africa, where they then become illegal immigrants. But many times that does not work out for them. We saw not too long ago in Midrand, there was a house that was busted where quite a lot of young Ethiopian men were found that were smuggled here. But when they reached South Africa, they were kept hostage by the gang, and they wanted to force them into forced labor. So those are basically the challenges that are being faced by law enforcement. Our borders are extremely porous, and of course corruption play a major role. So
when we look at the role of the Border Management Authority, even the different departments and the control measures, I mean, we've seen that they've heightened up their efficiencies in terms of operations, but what are the gaps that are still emerging at this point, given that you're saying for every incident that is, that does come to the fore, there's about 20 others that have slipped through.
Of course, one of the challenges, we have the BMA that's been with us now for almost a year, and we see that a new broom sweeps clean. They're really making some inroads, and one of the reasons of that can be, your people that used to work at the border post or postal port of entries, they have been corrupted by these syndicates. Now a bunch of new guys are moving in. They're not being corrupted as yet, so they're making a lot of buzz just by doing their routine work. So that is the positive on that. A challenge that we have is that they are tremendously under-resourced at the moment, understaffed. South Africa has got, a tremendous amount of land border posts, but also seaports as well as airports that need to be manned, and we just don't have enough manpower and resources to effectively do that. We saw that the minister promised that they're going to up that, they're going to look into that, and within the next few years they're going to try to create less porous borders for South Africa with that concern.
Questions about who the traffickers are, in fact, come to the fore. But also, speaking about resources, that identification process and even the initial care process of child victims of transnational trafficking. What does that process look like, just for those who don't really understand how intricate the operations actually are?
Well, in the first place, it always work on supply and demand. So, for instance, you got a child sex ring here in South Africa that is active, and they need new children. They would approach the smuggling or the trafficking syndicate. This syndicate will source the children. They will smuggle the children across our borders, and then they will sell these children to these syndicates. That is typically how it works, but also in the countries where the children come from, they have to have a big network in order to source those children. Some of the children are being sold by the parents due to dire economic circumstances. Some of the children are being stolen, etc. So they make use of different techniques, but that is basically your value chain that is in place. Your syndicates, the one feet of the other. One syndicate doesn't do everything. The one link into the other, and then they complete this crime.
Willem, I have to wrap up. I just want to look at the data and the patterns that have come to the fore. What is missing? What do we also need to be looking at? What's not as evident as we analyze the phenomenon and really in solving this crisis in South Africa?
Well, what is evident, a problem that we have is we have got our prisons are full. The police do make a lot of arrests. Our challenges that we have at the moment is the investigation of those crimes, to build a decent case docket, and then our other challenge is to push that through court. It's one thing having people in prison as a waiting trial. It's another thing securing a good conviction that will also lift the trust of the public in the judiciary and the police. That is currently at an all-time low.